Oh, hey, welcome back, guys. I'm Zell, and today we're going to look at my favorite medium-sized EDC knives. And we're going to define medium-sized EDC real quick. It's going to be a blade length of 2.5 to right around 3 inches, and right around 3 ounces or less in weight. Has to be a knife that stays pretty small in the pocket and out of the way. So, you guys know the drill. Come on in here, let's get a look at them. Alright guys, starting our countdown with number 5, we have the Byrd Meadowlark 2. This really, in my opinion, is quite the knife. For less than 20 bucks, you get pretty much a Spyderco Delica. You don't get quite as soft edges, and you don't get the blade steel. But the 8CR13 MOV in these knives works well. It dulls predictably. It doesn't have a tendency to chip or roll. So it's alright. And I would carry this one over a VG10 model Delica most of the time, simply because it does dull predictably and you know where you stand with it. Moving on along, we have the Ontario Rat 2. This little knife is one of those knives that if I had found this 2, 3, 4 years ago, we would be, I don't know, talking more about guns or motorcycles or something else, because I would have treated this knife just like I treat the Victorinox Classic SDs. It is a great everyday carry knife, and I probably would have just bought 4 or 5 of them so that I always had one sharp, and if I lost one, I had another one, because they come in at $30 or under. Made in Taiwan, Aus 8 steel, so we get that nice edge, and that edge isn't terribly beautiful. I could have done a better job there with the polish on it, but I assure you it's very sharp. And it carries well, very slim. So that is number 4 on our list. Moving on to number 3, we're moving up in price a bit to the Spyderco Delica 4. And I love this knife, and I just like the blade steel. The Delica 4, just like the Meadowlark 2, very thin, very light. The Spyderco pocket clips, they carry extremely well, these little knives. And they give you plenty of blade to get almost any EDC task done. My only issue here is I wish I had got this in ZDP 189, and maybe I'll do that later, because I really, really do like the Delica because of the way it carries. It's one of those knives you can stick in your pocket. It's so light, you can almost forget it's there, yet it stays solidly in your pocket. And that solidly in your pocket for some of these smaller knives is a big deal. You want something that stays in there, because these knives are small, light, it's easy for them to get caught on things, and easy for the pocket clip to get caught on things, and have that knife slide out of your pocket and you don't even know it. You go to reach for it and it's gone. Anyhow, this is number 3 on the list. A very nice knife. And at number 2 on the list, we have the Kershaw Slyline. I had a little reservation about putting this one on the list because the example I have is in Damascus steel, and that is a very beautiful blade, but it does not make a great EDC knife. Damascus takes a lot of care to maintain a fine edge, and of course the Damascus takes some oiling because it will rust. So that steel does not make the greatest EDC steel. However, this knife can be purchased in Sandvik. I think it's 14C28N, and you guys can correct me in the comments if that's the wrong number. And that Sandvik steel is wonderful for a modestly priced EDC knife. It dulls predictably and can be stropped, or ceramic rods, or whatever your method is for getting the knife back to a sharpened state, a very sharp state, can be done quickly and easily. And even if you're doing quite a bit with a knife, that sandvik will stay sharp. Even with regular use, not heavy use, but regular use throughout the day, it'll stay sharp for several days. And then it can be brought back to sharpness fairly quickly. And also, I've seen this knife available in lots of different steels. LMAX, S30V. Right now, I think Blade HQ has some S30Vs with carbon fiber scales, which would be really nice. Anyhow, that is number 2. And before we get to number 1, we have some honorable mentions. Our first honorable mention is the K-Bar Dozier Designs Hunter. I picked up one of these. It was on sale somewhere, and I wasn't too sure about it. The blade looks kind of stubby there, and it's got just a little bit of rock in blade play in each direction, but this thing only weighs like 2.15 ounces, and it's got Ozark steel in it, which if you watch very many of my videos, you know that for the inexpensive knives, Ozark is one of my favorites. Takes a nice polish and a fine edge, and dulls predictably, and it's pretty easy to get that edge back. So, good knife, just not good enough to crack the top 5. Another honorable mention, and this one I don't really put in the EDC category, but the Shuffle 2. $20 or less, and you get that beefy little blade. Now, for me, this is kind of a camp knife, or a throw it on the bike knife, or desk knife, because hey, you probably got the coolest bottle opener out there, and as we've tested that a few times, that bottle opener works great. And it carries well if you do decide to carry it. Moving on along here. Now, many times this knife right here would win out, especially if we were doing a $50 or less EDC knife countdown. But the stock pocket clip, and this one has a aftermarket pocket clip on it on purpose, because that stock clip is worse than the one on the Skyline. You put this thing in your pocket, tip up, and you have probably that much of the knife sticking out. And it's, again, oddly shaped, gets caught on things, and as I've said before, I'm not sure what mechanic makes that happen, but it sure does get caught on things. If you carry it tipped down, though, it's alright, even with the stock clip. With this aftermarket clip, it's great. But whenever you're talking about a $30 knife, spending another 20-some bucks on an aftermarket clip seems kind of silly. But it does employ Kershaw SpeedSafe system. This one happens to be the composite model with the sandvik steel on top, with the D2 brazed to it, and D2 is a steel I like a lot. And the best part of the knife is it's pretty light, it's really slim, but it gives you this blade and this modified Wharncliffe, I would say. I think Kershaw calls it a drop point, but whenever we look at it here, I really don't know if I'd call that a drop point. But anyhow, once you learn how to use this blade, it is a wonderful EDC blade. Its only drawback is right here. It gets really, really thin. And You stick this thing in something and give it just a little bit of torque in the wrong direction, it breaks off. Anyhow, that is the last of our honorable mentions, and now let's move on. Alright guys, our number one knife for spring 2016 in the medium-sized EDC category is a knife that's loved and hated and universally used no matter what people say about it. It's a knife that's cussed for costing too much, and a knife that people say feels cheap for the amount of money they spend. But friends, whenever you put one of these in your hand, one of these little mini Griptilians, and you go to use it, it all comes together. And I had the compulsion to go wash this one before I brought it out here for you guys, but I decided not to. I wanted you to see that I wasn't joking. I use this knife. It goes with me fairly often, not always as a main EDC knife. I have a small little pockets thing from Night Eyes that I carry part of the time, and this thing is always clipped in there. I may have a larger knife on me, but this one is always there. And once you get into this and learn how to use the axis lock mechanism, it makes it one of the easiest one-handed use knives out there in this size category. And now mine has the deep carry clip on it. If you have a Griptilian and you do not have a deep carry clip, and you want one, call Benchmade or send them an email, and the nice folks over at Benchmade will take care of you. You know, I really don't know exactly what we should say about this besides it is just a great medium EDC knife. It feels good in the hand. There's plenty of grip on the thing, hence the name Griptilian. But none of it is overly aggressive. None of it is going to eat your hand up, even if you use a knife constantly throughout the day. And one of the main reasons that it sits at number one in this list is that right there. If you are in a situation where you're working on something, no matter what it is, and you need to make cuts and then do something, then make some cuts again, I think about whenever I'm working on a vehicle. Let's say I'm replacing a bunch of vacuum hose. I need to get the knife out, I need to cut the hose, and then I'm going to have to measure. Okay, if I take some of these other knives out there, I'm going to be compelled to set this knife down somewhere under the hood and just leave it sit there open. If I have this mini Griptilian with me, I'll close it up and then I'll set it down, making everything several degrees safer. That's one of those things with one-handed use. We talk about that all the time. But being able to open and close the knife with one hand, it's not about being cool. I mean, yeah, it is kind of enjoyable to have a knife that works as well as this does. But it's just a safety factor. Whenever you're doing things like that, you don't end up laying a knife down open and then have you or someone else have it get cut because that knife's laying there open because a knife falls off the tray you're working on, or whatever circumstance. A closed knife is always a safer knife. And here they are: number 5, the Byrd Meadowlark 2; number 4, the Ontario Rat 2; number 3, the Spyderco Delica 4 FRN Lightweight; number 2, the Kershaw Skyline; and number 1, the Benchmade Mini Griptilian. It's kind of interesting to me, 3 out of the 5 knives have been around for years in some form or another. The Delicas went through some changes, but they have been around for a very long time, and still today, they are some of the best medium-sized EDC knives available. Well guys, that's my list. And, you know, the Benchmade Mini Griptilian makes that list because of that axis lock and because of the way it works. You know, it's almost an extension of your own body once you learn how to mess with one of these things. And that is a big deal to me, because there's many times that I'm somewhere where I need to have that knife closed, but I don't need to put it away yet. You know, like what I said earlier, working on a vehicle, cutting vacuum hose, or whatever I might be doing under the hood of something. If I've got, say, a buck 110 or 112, I'm going to be inclined to leave that thing open and set it up on the air cleaner or up in front of the radiator or something like that, and places where it could fall off and end up cutting me or someone else. If I've got one of these, I'm going to shut it every time because it's easy. And that's just a lot safer. Now, it isn't the most svelte little knife, but that is one of the big reasons it gets the top spot. There's another knife that I spoke about in that list, the Rat 2. Now, I mentioned that if I had found this thing a few years ago, I'd probably just have a bowl full of these and grab one on my way out the door. And there's a lot of truth to that. One of my favorite knives to carry for a long time was the Kershaw Leek. And this knife is very, very much like a Kershaw Leek in size. Operation is different, but still very quick and easy to deploy and close, which makes a good EDC knife in my opinion. And even though the Rat 2 isn't flashy, definitely not as cool looking as a Kershaw Leek, it's got a blade design that's going to last better than the Leek's real thin pointy tip. Really wish Kershaw would bring that utility blade back they occasionally have in the Leek with a plain edge. If you're listening, Kershaw, I want one of those. Anyhow, Rat 2 is a great knife. However, we got one more thing to talk about with it. But I do want to talk about the Kershaw Skyline for just a moment. This is another knife that could be number one on the list, right there with the mini grip, and $60 cheaper if you get the Sandvik version. The only reason it doesn't rate all the way up at the top is because it is pretty much tip down left or right hand and tip up right hand, and the tip up right hand leaves so much of this blade sticking out of your pocket in kind of an awkward manner that gets caught on things. You know, maybe it doesn't for you, but it sure does for me, that I can't carry it for an EDC knife. If Kershaw put a better clip on this thing, you know, something waterfall style, something that was deeper carry, this in Sandvik or one of the other steels, and this knife has came out in a lot of steels. Those Spyderco style sprint runs that Kershaw does, this is one of the knives that gets one of the odd steels fairly often. You know, like this one here's Damascus. But that's what's holding this knife back. Otherwise, it's thin, it's light, it is perfectly pocketable. It's just a pocket clip. And I know I could go to eBay and I could fix that, but that kind of gets on my nerves. I've done it with some of the other knives, but you know, you have a $40 knife here, or $42 right now, and go out and spend another 20 bucks on a knife clip, might as well get the mini grip. You know, it's as simple as that. These two knives right here could have been at the top of the list. Literally. Build quality on these things are excellent. Yeah, they don't have the greatest steel in the world, but they've got AUS 8, and they've got a really good version of 8CR13 MOV. And they're cheap. 20 bucks, less than 30 bucks usually. Somewhere between 25 and 30 on the Rat 2. The reason they're not at the top of the list is Byrd, a division of Spyderco, and Ontario Knife Company have chosen not to warranty these things like Kershaw does and like Benchmade does. If you need parts, you break one of these things, you've got a year, and you've got to produce a receipt. You've got to go through the entire hassle of returning, like a piece of electronics or something like that. It's a pain. And it's a pain. It's set up that way on purpose. Because at $30, if you have a problem with this knife after you've had it for 3 or 4 months, what are you going to do? Are you going to go through that hassle, or are you just going to go buy another one? Or be mad and buy the other one? That's why it's set up that way. They don't want to mess with it, and they assume that at the price point of the knives, you'll just go buy another one. And that happens, but it's one of the things you get whenever you buy this Benchmade, this Kershaw, either one of the Kershaws. If I have a problem with this mini Griptilian, no matter what it is, if it's a problem and it's not something I've done where I've abused the knife, I send it to Benchmade. Benchmade fixes the knife and sends it back to me. I'm out $7.50 or whatever it takes to mail it back to Benchmade. Same thing with the Kershaw. Something goes wrong with the Kershaw, I put it in a box, send it to Kershaw, call them first. Put it in a box, send it to Kershaw. They fix it, and they send it back to me. And there's no needing to go find a receipt. There's no any of the hassle stuff. In fact, whenever I've called and talked to Kershaw, it's been straight through. You do have to deal with a little bit of the menu system, but as soon as you get out of that, it rings a couple times, somebody answers the phone. For that matter, same thing with Buck, same thing with Benchmade. I haven't had to call Spyderco on anything in a long time, but I assume they're pretty much the same way. Warranty can be worth a lot. That's a decision you have to make. This knife is $18. If you really like it and you're willing to say, okay, if I break it, who cares? It was $20, I'll buy a new one. That's great. But whenever I started looking through the warranties on these knives, that really bothered me. Because Kershaw has that same warranty on pretty much every knife that I'm aware of that they produce. At any time, I can call them up or fill out their web form, and even a $20 knife, I can send it back to them and have it fixed. It may sound ludicrous to send a $20 knife back to them and have it fixed, and maybe it is. But say you had your kid's name engraved on it, or it was given to you by somebody, and maybe the knife was more special than the $20. Kershaw's there to take care of you. Benchmade's there to take care of you. Buck's there to take care of you. And Spyderco is. And I'm sure there are other companies that are as well. I just wanted to point out that these two knives that could have been way up on that list didn't make it simply for that reason. Guys, I really appreciate you watching. Be sure to hit me up on those social media links. It's Zelrick42 everywhere, but Twitter. On Twitter, it's just plain Zelrick. And send me pics of your knives. Show me what you got. That would be awesome. Let's get a conversation started on this stuff. And, even guns and gear, we've got some of that to go through. I've just been kind of going through the catalog of knives here since we started this, but we got a whole pile of stuff back here behind me and over there, and we'll get to it. And while we're here on YouTube, click them buttons down there, that like, share, and subscribe. And you're going to want to subscribe. We got a lot more coming. And you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.